attentive. Sir, you need to leave this terminal immediately. This section is for first-class passengers only, not people like you.
The words cut through the ambient noise of Denver International Airport's premium terminal like a blade through silk. Rebecca Martinez stood with her arms crossed, her Skylink Airlines supervisor badge catching the afternoon light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her voice carried enough authority to turn heads throughout the marble-floored space where leather armchairs clustered around polished oak tables, and the carpet beneath bore patterns that whispered of exclusivity and privilege. She was staring down at a black man seated calmly in one of those leather chairs, his athletic frame relaxed despite the confrontation brewing around him. He wore gray Nike running shorts that still showed faint salt stains from dried sweat, a moisture-wicking blue shirt that clung to his muscular torso, and white running shoes bearing the honest scars of 26.2 miles through Denver's streets. Around his neck hung a finisher's medal from that morning's Denver Marathon, the ribbon slightly frayed from where it had rubbed against his shirt during the final grueling miles. The man looked up at Rebecca with eyes that held no anger, no defensiveness, just a calm steadiness that seemed to unnerve her more than any outburst might have. His hands remained folded in his lap, his breathing, even his posture suggesting someone accustomed to being challenged but equally accustomed to standing his ground. "I have a confirmed first-class ticket," he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of controlled authority that comes from years of leadership. "Flight 447 to Atlanta, seat 2A. Rebecca's expression hardened. At 35, she had worked for Skylink Airlines for 8 years, climbing from gate agent to terminal supervisor through what she considered unwavering dedication to company standards and passenger security. She prided herself on maintaining the premium terminal's exclusive atmosphere, ensuring that paying first-class passengers received the elevated experience they had purchased. To her, that meant keeping out anyone who didn't meet her personal standards of what first-class passengers should look like. "Let me see that ticket," she demanded, extending her hand with the expectation of immediate compliance. The man reached into a simple black duffel bag and produced a boarding pass. Rebecca examined it with the intensity of a jeweler studying a suspicious diamond. The ticket was legitimate, she could see that immediately. Flight 447, seat 2A, first class. But legitimacy wasn't the issue for Rebecca. The issue was appropriateness. "This could be fake," she announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "We've had problems with people using stolen credit cards to book flights they can't afford." Kyle Thompson appeared at Rebecca's shoulder like a shadow summoned by conflict. At 42, Kyle had been working airport security for 6 years, and he had developed an instinct for situations that might require his intervention. He was a large man with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of presence that suggested he had once served in law enforcement. His uniform was crisp, his posture military straight, and his expression carried the skeptical alertness of someone who assumed trouble until proven otherwise. "Problem here?" Rebecca. Kyle asked, his gaze fixed on the man in running clothes. "This gentleman seems confused about which terminal he belongs in." Rebecca replied, her tone suggesting that confusion was a generous interpretation of the situation. The man in the chair remained motionless. "I'm exactly where I belong," he said evenly. "In the seat I paid for in the terminal my ticket grants me access to." Kyle studied him with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to sizing up potential problems. What he saw was a black man in athletic wear carrying a gym bag in a space designed for business suits and designer handbags. The mathematics of the situation seemed simple enough to Kyle. "Sir, we're going to need to see multiple forms of identification and verify your booking through our computer network," Kyle said, his voice carrying the weight of official procedure. "We have protocols for situations like this." Situations like what the man asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Around them, the premium terminal hummed with the usual Sunday afternoon energy. Business travelers clutched laptops and spoke in hushed tones about quarterly reports and client meetings. Wealthy families supervised children who had never known the chaos of general airport seating. The air carried the scent of expensive coffee from the premium cafe and the subtle fragrance of leather conditioning oil from the furniture. But now that normal energy was shifting, focusing as other passengers began to notice the confrontation developing in their exclusive space. Conversations grew quieter, as people strained to listen without appearing to eavesdrop. Some pretended to read magazines while their attention fixed on the drama unfolding just a few seats away. Near Gate B, 47. Tyler Brooks looked up from his laptop where he had been editing video content for his social media channels. At 19, Tyler was a college sophomore at the University of Colorado, majoring in communications with a focus on digital journalism. He had grown up understanding the power of social media to document and amplify injustice, and something about the scene developing across the terminal triggered his instincts for recognizing a story worth telling. Tyler was white, with sandy brown hair and the kind of earnest expression that made people trust him with their stories. He wore jeans and a Colorado Buffaloes sweatshirt, and his backpack contained the tools of his trade, a high-end smartphone with professional camera capabilities, portable battery packs, and editing software that could process and upload content within minutes of recording. He had watched the interaction begin and had immediately sensed that what he was seeing was more than a simple boarding pass verification. The body language of all involved the tone of the conversation, the assumptions being made. It all felt disturbingly familiar from countless viral videos he had seen documenting similar confrontations. Tyler quietly activated his phone's camera app and began recording, making sure the device was positioned to capture both audio and video without being obvious about his documentation. He had learned from his journalism professors that sometimes the most important stories were the ones that happened when people thought no one was watching. Dr. Patricia Hendricks sat in a chair 20 feet away pretending to review patient files on her tablet, while actually listening to every word of the confrontation. At 45, she was a successful cardiologist returning to Atlanta after presenting research at a medical conference in Denver. She was white, with graying brown hair pulled back in a professional bun, wearing a navy blue business suit that spoke of both competence and success. Dr. Hendricks had grown up in the South during the 1980s and 1990s, and while she considered herself progressive and enlightened, she had also learned to avoid confrontations that might make her uncomfortable. She recognized what was happening as wrong, but she struggled with the social dynamics of intervening in a situation that didn't directly involve her. Behind the gate counter for Flight 447, Sofia Ramirez was processing passenger upgrades when she noticed the commotion developing in the seating area. At 28, Sofia had been working for Skylink Airlines for 4 years, starting as a baggage handler, and working her way up to gate agent through night school and determination that impressed her supervisors. Sofia was Hispanic, with dark hair that she kept pulled back in a ponytail during work hours, and brown eyes that missed very little of what happened in her assigned gate area. She took pride in treating every passenger with respect and professionalism, regardless of their appearance or perceived social status. She had grown up in a family where hard work was respected, regardless of the clothes it required, and she had learned to judge people by their actions rather than their appearances. What she was watching made her deeply uncomfortable. She could see Marcus Johnson's boarding pass from her position. It was legitimate, properly processed, and indicated a passenger who had paid full price for the first-class service. What she could also see was that he was being treated differently than any white passenger would be treated under similar circumstances. Sofia began quietly documenting the interaction not through recording but by noting names, times, and specific statements in the incident log that gate agents were required to maintain for any passenger service issues. She had a feeling that this particular incident was going to require very detailed documentation. The man in the running clothes, Marcus Johnson, though none of the confronting staff had bothered to ask his name, remained seated with the kind of composure that comes from years of facing adversity without losing one's dignity. At 38, Marcus had learned that anger, no matter how justified, often gave other people permission to dismiss both him and his concerns. Marcus stood 6'2" inches with the lean, powerful build of a serious recreational athlete. His marathon training had been both physical preparation and mental discipline, a way of processing the stress and responsibility that came with leading a major corporation while maintaining the clarity of thought necessary for making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars in revenue. The medal hanging around his neck represented more than just athletic achievement. He had finished the Denver Marathon in 3 hours and 42 minutes, placing him in the top 15% of his age group. But, more importantly, he had run those 26.2 miles in memory of his father who had passed away the previous year after a battle with cancer. His father, Robert Johnson, had built Johnson Global Logistics from a single delivery truck purchased with a loan secured against the family home in 1987. What started as a local courier service had grown into a nationwide operation with $2 billion in annual revenue, 18,500 employees across 47 states and logistics contracts with every major airline, including a $65 million annual agreement with Skylink Airlines. Marcus had spent his entire adult life preparing to lead the company his father had built. He had earned an MBA from Wharton, worked in every department of Johnson Global Logistics, from loading docks to executive boardrooms, and had traveled to military bases, corporate headquarters, and distribution centers to understand every aspect of the business that now employed nearly 19,000 families. His personal net worth approached $847 million, largely tied to his ownership stake in Johnson Global Logistics and his diversified investment portfolio. He owned homes in Atlanta, Denver, and Martha's Vineyard, drove a collection of luxury cars, and traveled frequently on the company's private jet, a Bombardier Global 7500 that was currently hangared at Denver International Airport, waiting for his decision about whether commercial or private travel would better serve his schedule. But none of that mattered to Rebecca Martinez or Kyle Thompson. What mattered to them was that he was a black man in running clothes carrying a gym bag in a space they believed was reserved for people who looked different, dressed differently, and carried themselves with the kind of obvious wealth that required no investigation. Sir Kyle continued his voice, taking on the official tone he used when he wanted to establish his authority. "We're going to need you to come with us to verify your identity and your right to be in this terminal." Marcus looked up at Kyle with the same steady calm he had shown Rebecca. "Officer Thompson," he said, reading Kyle's name tag, "I want you to think very carefully about what you're asking me to do. I want you to consider whether you would make the same request of anyone else sitting in this terminal with a valid boarding pass." Kyle's jaw tightened. He wasn't accustomed to having his authority questioned, especially not by someone he viewed as a potential security risk. "Sir, I'm going to need you to cooperate with our security procedures." "I am cooperating," Marcus replied. "I'm sitting in my assigned area waiting for my flight exactly like every other passenger in this terminal. The difference is that none of them are being asked to prove they belong here." Rebecca stepped closer, her voice rising slightly. "The difference is that none of them are dressed inappropriately for a premium terminal environment." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Around the terminal, conversations stopped completely as passengers realized they were witnessing something significant. Tyler Brooks adjusted his phone to ensure he was capturing both video and audio clearly. Dr. Hendricks looked up from her tablet with undisguised concern. Sofia Ramirez felt her stomach tighten as she recognized that the confrontation was escalating beyond any reasonable passenger service interaction. Marcus remained seated, but something in his expression shifted, not toward anger, but toward a kind of resolved awareness that this moment was going to define something much larger than a simple travel inconvenience. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "I want you to repeat what you just said. I want you to state clearly for everyone here to understand what you believe is inappropriate about my appearance." Rebecca hesitated for the first time, sensing that she might be approaching dangerous territory, but unable to back down without losing face in front of her colleague and the watching passengers. "I said that you're dressed inappropriately for a premium terminal environment," she repeated, though with less conviction than before. "And what specifically makes my appearance inappropriate?" Marcus asked. The question was simple, but it carried the weight of decades of assumptions, prejudices, and unexamined beliefs about who belonged in exclusive spaces and who did not. It demanded an honest answer to a question that most people preferred to leave unasked and unanswered. Kyle shifted uncomfortably, beginning to sense that the situation was developing in ways he hadn't anticipated. Rebecca looked around the terminal, suddenly aware that every eye was focused on her, waiting for her response to a question that would either justify her actions or reveal them for what they really were. Rebecca's face flushed as she realized the trap Marcus had laid with his simple question. She couldn't explicitly state that his race was the issue. That would be legally problematic and career-ending. But she also couldn't back down without admitting that her entire approach had been wrong. So she chose the most dangerous path available, doubling down on her assumptions while trying to make them sound like legitimate security concerns. "Let me be absolutely clear," Rebecca said, her voice carrying across the terminal with forced authority. "I've seen this type of situation before. People buy tickets with stolen credit cards, or they use points they shouldn't have access to, and then they try to access premium services they can't legitimately afford." She gestured toward Marcus with obvious disdain. "Look at yourself. You're sweaty in gym clothes carrying a gym bag. This isn't Planet Fitness. This is a first-class terminal." Kyle Thompson stepped forward, emboldened by Rebecca's aggressive stance. "Sir, we're going to need to call airport police to verify your identity and investigate possible fraud. We have zero tolerance for passengers who attempt to access services through deceptive means." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not anger, but a cold, clear recognition of exactly what was happening and exactly what it was going to cost the people standing in front of him. He had faced discrimination before, but rarely had it been so blatant, so public, and so thoroughly documented by witnesses. Officer Thompson Marcus said, his voice remaining perfectly calm. "I want you to state clearly what specific evidence you have that I obtained my ticket through fraudulent means." Kyle's training had not prepared him for a suspect who asked direct questions about evidence and procedure. Most people in Marcus's position either became angry, which justified escalation, or became compliant, which justified their removal. Marcus was doing neither, and Kyle found himself improvising responses he wasn't qualified to make. "Well, sir, there are several indicators," Kyle began, though he hadn't actually identified any specific indicators beyond his own assumptions. "The way you're dressed, the fact that you don't have proper luggage for first-class travel, and your reluctance to provide additional identification all suggest potential fraud." Tyler Brooks, still recording from his position across the terminal, whispered into his phone for the benefit of his live stream audience, which had grown to nearly 500 viewers in the past 10 minutes. "This is absolutely insane, guys. They're literally profiling this marathon runner because he's black and wearing athletic clothes. This is 2024, and this is happening right now at Denver International Airport." The live stream comments began flooding in faster than Tyler could read them. "This is disgusting. Someone call the news. Get this man's name. Record everything. I'm sharing this everywhere. This is why I don't fly." Dr. Patricia Hendricks finally stood up from her chair, unable to remain a passive observer any longer. At 45, she had spent her career in professional environments where she had witnessed subtle discrimination but had rarely seen it displayed so openly. Her medical training had taught her to recognize patterns and symptoms, and what she was witnessing had all the symptoms of racial profiling. "Excuse me," Dr. Hendricks said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being taken seriously in crisis situations. "I'm Dr. Patricia Hendricks, and I've been watching this entire interaction. This gentleman has done absolutely nothing wrong. He's sitting quietly in a seat he has every right to occupy, and you're treating him like a criminal based on nothing but your own assumptions." Rebecca turned towards Dr. Hendricks with obvious irritation. "Ma'am, this is a security matter, and we don't need passengers interfering with our procedures." "These aren't procedures," Dr. Hendricks replied firmly. "This is harassment. I've been sitting here for 45 minutes, and I've watched you process dozens of passengers without asking anyone else for additional identification or questioning anyone else's right to be here. Kyle attempted to regain control of the situation. "Doctor, we appreciate your concern, but we're trained security professionals and we need to follow established protocols for potentially suspicious activity. Show me the protocol that defines suspicious activity as running a marathon and wearing athletic clothes afterward," Dr. Hendricks challenged. Sofia Ramirez could no longer remain silent behind her gate counter. She had spent 4 years working for Skylink Airlines, and she had processed thousands of passengers without ever seeing anyone treated the way Marcus Johnson was being treated. Her training had emphasized customer service respect and professionalism, and nothing she was witnessing aligned with those values. Rebecca Sophia called out, stepping away from her counter. "His boarding pass is legitimate. I processed it myself. He paid full price for his ticket, and he has every right to be here." Rebecca whirled towards Sophia with fury in her eyes. "You need to stay at your counter and do your job. This doesn't involve gate agents." "It involves all of us when we're discriminating against passengers," Sophia replied, her voice shaking slightly, but her conviction clear. "This is wrong, and everyone here knows it's wrong." Marcus remained seated throughout the escalating confrontation, watching as more and more people were drawn into a situation that revealed the fault lines of assumption, privilege, and prejudice that typically remained hidden beneath the surface of polite society. He had learned over the years that these moments were tests, not just of his own character, but of the character of everyone around him. A businessman in an expensive suit who had been pretending to read emails looked up and addressed Kyle directly. "Officer, I've been traveling first class for 20 years and I've never seen anyone treated like this. What exactly has this man done wrong?" Kyle found himself surrounded by questioning voices and challenging stares. His authority, which had seemed absolute just minutes earlier, was being undermined by passengers who refused to accept his assumptions as legitimate security concerns. "Sir Kyle," said to the businessman, "we have protocols for dealing with suspicious individuals and we need passengers to allow us to do our jobs." "But what makes him suspicious?" the businessman pressed. "I'm wearing jeans and a golf shirt. My luggage is smaller than his. My boarding pass looks identical to his. Why isn't my presence suspicious?" Kyle couldn't answer the question honestly without admitting that race was the determining factor, and he couldn't answer it dishonestly without revealing the weakness of his position to everyone listening. Tyler Brooks continued narrating for his live stream, which had now grown to over 1,200 viewers. The airline staff can't explain what this man has done wrong. They can't explain why he's being treated differently than everyone else. They're just demanding that he prove he belongs somewhere he clearly has every right to be. The comments on Tyler's stream had become a torrent of outrage and support. "Someone find out this man's name. Call the ACLU. This is going viral. I'm never flying Skylink again. Airport security is out of control. Document everything." Marcus checked his phone and saw several missed calls from his assistant Maria Santos, who monitored social media mentions of Johnson Global Logistics and had undoubtedly seen Tyler's live stream or others like it. He also saw a text message from Captain Williams, the pilot of his company's private jet, asking if he needed alternative transportation arrangements. Marcus typed a quick response to Captain Williams, "Stand by. Situation developing. May need pickup in 15 minutes. Rebecca saw Marcus using his phone and immediately became suspicious. "Sir, who are you texting? Are you coordinating with others to create a disturbance?" The accusation was so absurd that several passengers laughed out loud. Marcus looked up at Rebecca with something approaching pity. "Rebecca," who had said quietly, "every word you've spoken in the last 20 minutes has been recorded by multiple people and broadcast live to thousands of viewers. I don't need to coordinate with anyone to create a disturbance. You're creating quite a sufficient disturbance all by yourself." Kyle pulled out his radio and called for additional security backup. "Terminal B, this is Thompson. I need additional officers at Gate B47. We have a potentially uncooperative passenger refusing to comply with security screening." Officer David Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran of airport police, received the call while patrolling Terminal A. At 41, Rodriguez had seen thousands of passenger disputes, and he had learned to distinguish between genuine security threats and power struggles between staff and passengers. Kyle Thompson's call sounded more like the latter, but procedure required him to respond to any request for backup. Rodriguez was Hispanic, the son of immigrants who had taught him to respect both authority and justice and to recognize the difference between the two. He had worked in law enforcement long enough to understand that some of his colleagues occasionally allowed personal biases to influence their professional judgment, and he had developed a reputation for de-escalating situations that other officers might have allowed to spiral out of control. As Rodriguez walked towards Terminal B, he wondered what kind of situation required backup for a single passenger who was described as uncooperative rather than violent, threatening, or dangerous. In his experience, truly dangerous passengers required very different language and very different responses. Meanwhile, Janet Morrison, the terminal manager, received an urgent call from her supervisor about a developing situation that was being broadcast live on social media. At 50, Janet had worked in airport management for 12 years, and she understood that viral videos of discriminatory treatment could cost the airport millions in revenue and damage relationships with airline partners. Janet was white, with silver hair and the kind of professional demeanor that suggested competence and authority. She had built her career by solving problems before they became crises, and she recognized immediately that the situation developing at Gate B47 had already moved beyond the problem stage and was rapidly approaching crisis level. Janet hurried toward the premium terminal, knowing that whatever she found when she arrived would likely determine whether the rest of her evening would be spent implementing damage control procedures or updating her resume. Back at Gate B47, Marcus Johnson remained seated in his leather chair surrounded by airport staff who couldn't articulate why he didn't belong there, and passengers who couldn't understand why he was being treated differently than anyone else. He had made a decision about how this situation would end, but he was allowing Rebecca Martinez and Kyle Thompson to dig their professional graves as deeply as possible before he revealed who he really was and what their assumptions were going to cost them. The Denver Marathon medal around his neck caught the afternoon light streaming through the terminal windows, a symbol of endurance, persistence, and the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself to be recognized by people who understand what real achievement looks like. In 18 minutes, Captain Williams would land Johnson